Hello everyone, my name is Eric Mertz and I am making a video game. This video game is called Splinter Zone and it's currently available on itch.io as well as on Gamejolt. Well, not the full game, it's a prototype you're going to see here. And what you're also going to see here is the latest version of this prototype, which I updated yesterday on a Sunday afternoon. And before I start talking about the current update itself, let's briefly, or at least try to talk briefly about what the game actually is. It's a game about escaping eternal punishment, as I try to call it. It's about a character that's trapped in this weird maze where they constantly have to traverse an endless stream of levels and fight everything and try to get as far as they can until they die. And then it repeats over and over again. And it's a game about you trying to get to best your own previous performances and maybe even trying to escape this whole system. In the end, when this game is fully released, there will be some way of you trying to, or even being able to escape this whole game and somehow ending this endless game. But yeah, this is the basic idea. Some of you may even know a very similar game mode from the previous Mega Man games. Mega Man 9 and 10 had an endless attack mode, which was basically very similar to this. It's more or less my attempt of making a whole game out of these game modes and themselves, because I like them really much. I like them actually more than the normal campaigns, at least in Mega Man 9. Anyway, so what does this actually mean? You're not actually playing completely randomly generated levels in this one. It's more like that you're playing through an endless randomly generated sequence of pre-built levels. So each level is pre-built by me, and then the order is completely randomized. Right now the prototype has 20 pre-built levels and 2 boss fights. You're seeing both of those boss fights in this video. However, you're going to see this boss fight several times. And it's a bit of a shame because the boss fight currently is a bit broken when you fight him with a very specific weapon upgrade, which somehow leads to him being completely immobilized for a few seconds. I have no idea why, but it happens. And now we actually can start talking about what's new in this version of the prototype for all of you who may have played older versions of it, because I completely changed the weapon system in this game. Previously to this update, the game, again very akin to Mega Man games, had a sub-weapon system. You had one main weapon, like the gun you already saw, and 2 sub-weapons, which kind of behaved a little bit differently, which had limited ammunition, and were more treated, at least by me, as situational tools, which could be useful, but in the end ended up being more or less completely useless, because they weren't really interesting to play around and were very limited in their situations where they were useful, and it wasn't really, people never used them. I even never used them when I played the game, and it was boring. And I got some very good feedback 10 days ago when I was showing this game at Radius Festival in Vienna. And the feedback was more or less the person more or less told me, why don't you just get rid of those sub-weapons and instead put in weapon modifiers? Like things that you can attach to your main weapon, which then change the behavior of this weapon completely around. And this is what I built in the last week when I got back home and sat down to make a short update for the prototype. I added, I think, 6 to 7 weapon modifiers. I actually don't know. I have to check again. But it's a collection of things that either change the physical properties of your weapon, as you can see right here. You now have a projectile that travels along on the ground and bounces off of walls, which of course is completely different, in the way you have to approach situations. As a weapon that shoots straight and passes through walls. You have to approach situations completely differently with this weapon. And you're now going to see an upgrade where this projectile, when it touches the floor or a wall, and also when it touches an enemy, will spawn additional projectiles. So this is another type of weapon upgrade that exists is like stuff that changes when your projectile hits something. And it's either going to be like, as you see here, like splitting projectiles. You're also going to see, or what's also in the in this version is an upgrade where your projectile is going to generate explosions every time it hits something. And of course, when you have modifications where the projectile bounces around, like with this upgrade right here, but also with a like completely with a bounce upgrade that is going to be applied to any kind of projectile you're going to have, and you have like this explosion modification or the splitting modification, it will of course then generate projectiles or explosion every time it bounces off of a wall, and it all gets pretty nuts and loud, and it's fun. And what I really like about this system is that it's already much more interesting to play around than the system I had before. And it's also very easy for me to come up with ideas what I may want to do next with it, and it's nice to play around with in terms of like designing stuff for it, but also in terms of playing around with it, and it's much more fun. And it also gives like a sense of progression to the game itself, because you're always starting out with your basic gun and then adding stuff onto it the longer you play it. And this way each run will get their own characteristics and will get their own like progression, and it's always going to be a little bit different. Of course, not that different in the prototype, because as I said, you're only like 7 upgrades right now. It's not that much, but it's already enough to like get a different feel for each situation and get a few different experience every now and then. So it's already, as I said, much more interesting to play around with. And this is more or less the main thing I added for this update. The other stuff I added is mostly stuff that hopefully addresses some issues with the difficulty people had. It's a bit hard for me to gauge how hard this game actually is, because I made it and I play it all the time. And since the difficulty or type of difficulty is very much oriented on Mega Man games, it's very much gauged towards like you having to learn everything. And when I make this game, I of course know how every enemy behaves, what every enemy type does, how like when each enemy is going to appear on screen and how they're going to appear on screen. There isn't much of like a learning experience or challenge for me in this. And therefore I kind of breeze through everything, as you can see a little bit in this video here. And it's, as I said, it's a bit hard for me to gauge this. And when I was showing this game at radios, and also like when I got feedback online, oftentimes people told me the game is really hard. And when I saw people playing it, I could like easily see why people were thinking that. And I tried to address some of these things. I adjusted some levels where people had trouble like just getting through. You also have a much longer invincibility period after you get hit. It's now 2 seconds. Before that it was a little bit less than 1 second, so it's also much more easier to just run through enemies instead of fighting them if you want that. The weapon upgrade system also should help you a little bit, because they tend to increase your damage output a little bit, and should make it therefore easier to kill enemies, because enemies will still have the same number of hit points either way. And it should hopefully be a little bit easier for people to get into the game. If not, please tell me. I don't know if I'm going to upgrade the prototype once again, but I think adjusting the difficulty is going to be something I'm going to have to do like all the time until I release the whole game, because right now I'm not really good at like gauging what's difficult for people and what isn't. So it's a bit hard for me. So yeah, any feedback in that respect is highly appreciated from me. And speaking of difficulty, you're now going to see something that actually makes the game more difficult the longer you play. As you can see in the upper right corner, you're past 100,000 points, or I was past 100,000 points, and now it's actually so that you're not going to get any more weapon upgrades after you reach 100,000 points. It's twofold actually. First of all, it's a bit weird to have an endless game without a... Here you can, by the way, see the bug in the AI. It's a bit weird to have a game which has no end, but also has some kind of progression in terms of how much damage you put out and everything. And having an endless stream of weapon upgrades, therefore, makes it like at some point you're going to be way too strong for the enemies there. So you have to have some kind of difficulty scaling at some point. And what's in here right now is that after 100,000 points, the damage output of the enemies increases. And it increases in 3 stages. After 100,000 points, they deal double damage. After 300,000 points, they deal 3 times damage. And after 500,000 points, they deal 4 times damage, which usually means after 500,000 points that you can maybe be hit twice or maybe once, depending on which enemy hits you. So this is it's quite an easy adjustment here, but considering that most people won't get that far in terms of points, it's mostly gauged towards people who are really good at this game, like, for example, myself, because the score of the game actually increases, like, the biggest increase in the score of the game comes from completing levels without taking damage. There's a multiplier running in the background that increases every time you complete a level without taking damage, and the further you get, of course, the higher these increases in score will be, and this means you're most likely only going to get this far and that high in score when you're already quite good at the game. And therefore, you're already quite proficient at getting through levels without taking damage. Therefore, increasing the enemy's damage output should make it more like should force you to be even more perfect than you already are, because you have lesser margin of error between those things. And as I said, it's probably going to be an ongoing process, but I think it's a good first step towards creating a system where you're challenged even though you're already quite good at the game, without completely ignoring people that are still going to or have to learn the game itself. And yeah, it's also a way for me to show off some parts of the system that's more or less going to be used for story purposes, because as I said, you're playing a character that's trapped in the system. And the upgrades you get is actually help from outside of this system. And after you reach a certain point, this help is going to be cut off, more or less. And this is also one way of which in the end will probably initiate some kind of escape sequence at some point. I'm still not quite sure how to actually do this, so I'm a bit hesitant to talk about it in detail, but that's more or less the basic idea behind all this. And I think I'm going to come to an end right now also, because this video is going to end fairly soon. I think I'm going to die in the next screen, more or less on purpose, because I don't want this to go on for forever. And yeah, this has been it. If you're interested in this game, you can download it either on itch.io or on Gamejolt. It's completely for free, at least the prototype is for free. Link is in the video description. If you're very nice or if you're interested, you can also vote for this game on Steam Greenlight. I have a Greenlight campaign running for about a month now, and it's going rather slowly, so if you want to help me out, please consider voting for it on Greenlight, or maybe sharing the link or talking about the prototype. I'm always looking towards constructive feedback, so if you play the game and find something that's bothering you in some way, please tell me. One word of warning though, the keyboard controls are awful right now. I already know that. It's going to be fixed at some point, but not right now. Right now I'm more mostly concerned about getting more content into the game and trying to gauge everything else, but I will take care of the control issues eventually, I promise this. Anyway, all the relevant links, as I said, are in the description of the video, and aside from that, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.